Hi, this is an audio check one. Audio check one, two, three.
Screen, can you remove the screen? Hello everyone, good afternoon. Hope you all are having a good day. Thank you so much for joining, and we believe that you had a good session yesterday. We all are very happy to receive your feedback, uh, mostly positive feedbacks from all of you. We also received some constructive um, comments that where we can improve. So thank you so much for that. Welcome to the second day of the faculty development program on pedagogy for media studies. I am Aloysius from the visual communication department of St.Joseph College, and today we have our speaker, Ms. Rashmi Mehta here. Um I welcome on behalf of all of us, uh, Ms. Rashmi Mehta um, is a postgraduate in English literature from University of Mumbai, and she also has a postgraduate diploma in media studies. Um, she has prior experience in teaching media studies, business communication, and English literature. She's a very innovative, a creative lecturer, a teacher in a lecture room. She has been receiving a lot of positive vibe or positive comments, positive response from all her students, present and the past. Um, in the leisure time, she is also writing short stories and poetry. Today, Ms. Rashmi Mehta is here to introduce more research, teaching methods and how we can expand our um, teaching approaches beyond the standard ones that we often hear. So it was a wonderful session yesterday where Mr. Avinash introduced us and gave an overview of what is pedagogy and teaching philosophy and the general view on teaching methods. Today, Ms. Mehta is going to kind of continue that and to give us a kind of a tool or techniques, tips on how we can do experiments, be creative in our lecture rooms. We all are teaching, creative field, media field, and as lecturers, it is important for us to be creative in our lecture room, and that's where Ms. Rashmi Mehta is uh, here to, kind of bring in more insights for us. Please feel free to engage in this session. If possible, keep your cameras on, and you can, if there is any questions that you want to raise, please, put it on the comment session, on the chat session, as well as during the Q&A or during the discussion session. You can, turn on your mic and you can, share it loud. Thank you. Over to Ms. Mehta.
Okay, I pulled a classic, right? I spoke without unmuting. So, hi everybody. I hope that you can hear me. If you can hear me, can you just say hi in the chat box so that I know that I am audible to you? I repeat, if you can hear me, can you just say hi in the chat box so that I know that I am audible? Okay, so all the highs I have currently are the people sitting in this room because I'm doing it in hybrid mode. So I know they can hear me. Other people, okay. So good to see that there are a lot of you who can hear me, right? So I will just share my screen. If you see me looking here and there, it's because this is happening hybrid. So most of you are online while some of the people are offline, right? So let's begin. Uh, while we begin, I just want to say that I know that most of you who are attending this are very well qualified, very well experienced people, right? So this is more to have like a discussion. I want to hear what you have to say, and maybe I can share, what I have sort of read up on. uh, I completely respect the experience and your years of teaching. And I think when you share, it'll help others to grow as well. So please do feel free to share. Okay, I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Give me a minute. Um, just a second, okay? Just hold on. Okay, so yeah, just give me a second. So just okay. So we are now going to begin today's session. I'm really sorry for this technical thing that we had going on here. I assume that it'll settle as we go on, right? So today we are talking about experiments on teaching methods, and there is no one method, right? So we just get started with it. Okay, just give me 1 minute. I'm sorry, there's just a small technical thing. Okay, we're good. So just when we begin, some questions to think about, right? So you can choose to write down some keywords in the chat box so that they may be used for discussion later, or you could simply reflect upon these questions, right? As I said earlier, you all come with very rich experience. So please share. You have about 2 minutes to share, right? You don't have to write in full sentences or paragraphs. I'm just looking for keywords just to get an idea of where we are at. Please do share freely. Okay, so and you don't have to go 1, 2, 3. You can choose to answer any one of the questions or just answer them randomly. Either way is okay. Whatever you are comfortable with. So the first question is, which is the most creative media assignment that I have done as a student? Which means, which is the most creative media assignment that you have done as a student? Which is the most challenging assignment that you have administered as a professor? And the third question is that today there are YouTube tutorials for everything, right? From content writing to video editing to sound editing. Everything is available on YouTube, and a lot of it is available for free. So, how is then a media facilitator or a media teacher, media professor? How is this person still relevant? Right? You have 2 minutes. If you say anything in the chat box, I will really be grateful to you. Any insights, any interventions at all will be great. Do not worry, there are no wrong answers. This is your experience, and your experience is valid. And I want to hear what you have to share. So maybe tell me if you think a media facilitator or a media professor is still relevant today, because everything is so on YouTube, right? I hope that the chat box is silent only because all of you are typing, right? Any interventions at all will be helpful. Okay, so we have somebody who says that as a student, the lab journal was challenging. As a professor, getting an authentic assignment is challenging. Okay, so thank you. I don't know what to call you, but I'm going to go with Samantha. I don't know prefixes here, so please don't mind. I'm not going to say sir, ma'am, doctor, professor. Right, all of you are very qualified, but I will be taking your first name. Right, so thank you, Samantha. And you say that getting an authentic assignment is challenging. I'm wondering if anybody else agrees with Samantha. And I'm wondering if it is challenging because of AI and because of how easy it is to give our thinking task to somebody else today. Right? For Gayatri, radio script and radio jockey performance was challenging. Okay, that's good. So you were talking about assignments that were challenging to you as a student. Maybe you can also speak about, do you think a media professor is still relevant today? Do we as media educators matter? Because literally everything is available online. So maybe yes, maybe no, maybe I don't know anything at all. So we have the HOD who says that as a student, he enjoyed the photo project on Marina Beach, and as a lecturer, he gave a very creative assignment of a photo exhibition that his students had curated. Right. So this is good intervention. Anybody else? Okay, I'll ask you a simple question. Just tell me yes or no. I'm sure that those of you who are, I'm sure maybe some of you are listening while having lunch or you're doing other things, and that's fine. But if you can just tell me yes or no, is a media professor still relevant today? If you can just give me yes or no, that is more than enough. Or you don't know. Okay, so we will go on maybe to answer this question as we move on to the further slides, and let's not push anybody into answering. But thank you, Gayatri and Samantha, for answering. It really means a lot to me, and I'm sure to the group as well. Although they will eventually open up, right? Uh, just give me a minute. Right. So in today's session, we are going to discuss the works of some theorists on media pedagogy. I know you had a lecture by Mr. Avinash yesterday on pedagogy, but we're going to take that a little beyond what he did, and we're going to look at some new teaching ideas that can be incorporated in the media classroom, reflect on some questions surrounding media teaching in India today, and we're going to share our thoughts with each other. Remember, when you go to the classroom, you like hearing from your students, right? Right now, it would be great if we can all speak and we can all share with each other, right? So a little more reflection. See if you want to answer some of these questions if the earlier one didn't suit your taste, right? Um, Number one, how does communication create but also challenge the status quo of society? Number two, as educators of communications and media, our students are being trained to understand structure, intent, content, and interpretation of messages, both visual and otherwise. What do you see as the modern day challenges to be able to carry this out effectively? And three, do you think media communications is essentially an interdisciplinary field? If yes, how can this potential be realized? Again, you can choose to answer any of the questions. You have about 2 minutes to do so, right? And once I get these answers, we can move on further in today's session. I encourage you all to write something, whatever it may be. Right, so I see that, I'm sorry, I'm going to go by first names because I don't know the prefixes, but I respect all of you. Okay, let that be that's set. Okay, so I want to hear from Aparna, Abhinaya, and Bharani, and Dhanraj, Sridevi, Shankar, Suganti, Jennifer, Rohit, Mr. Prakash. Anybody, any of you have any answers to these questions? Maybe you can just choose one question and give me some keywords. We will wait for 30 seconds more and then we will proceed with this session. Okay, so I think that media communications is very interdisciplinary, right? Like media and society does not exist in isolation with each other. So can you really teach media or can you really learn media without speaking about sociology, history, literature, politics, religion? It's not really possible, right? So I think media communications is perhaps one of the most interdisciplinary fields that exists, and that places all the more responsibility on media educators to create content that caters to this interdisciplinary nature of media communications, right? So being a communicator means being a powerful and influential figure in the society. That's what the HOD is saying. We have Madrasi, who says that encourage interdisciplinary research initiatives that bring together experts from different fields to study communication issues. Yes, that is a very good point, Madrasi. And we have Samantha again. Thank you for your active participation, Samantha and Gayatri. Media is interdisciplinary. Media became vital in all fields. That is absolutely right. And Gayatri puts forth a very important point saying that media can promote social justice and equality. And we will be picking this up in the later slides as we go on. Right? So now when we look at critical pedagogy for media studies, right, there are some works that I want to just highlight, and you can always go back and refer to these works to see what they are speaking about in more detail, right? So critical pedagogy, first of all, looks at a social critique, looks at social critique as a means of achieving social justice and is concerned with relationships between knowledge and power, right? We all know this. We had a pedagogy class yesterday. So some of the works that you can go back and refer to if you plan to use critical pedagogy in your classrooms. The first is, of course, Paulo Freire. We all know about him. His works are extremely famous, right? And we start with Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where he speaks about educational institutes as sites of political struggle. Right. So what this means is that the hierarchy that exists in the world outside gets replicated in our classrooms, and he urges that we break this hierarchy. So in Politics of Education, which was written in 1985, Paulo Freire speaks about the educator helping the students frame issues in a larger context. What this means is that if my student is making a documentary on illiteracy in a particular region, right? We cannot talk about illiteracy without speaking about caste, without speaking about class, without speaking about first generation learning, right? Without speaking about poverty. So all issues thereby get contextualized within a much larger framework, right? We moved then to Sprague. I'm sorry, it's all tomato pronunciations, proper nouns, anyways. Okay. So we moved then to Sprague, who speaks about the goals of communication education, 1990, where students learn to ask what is not said, right? So he says that one of the goals of communication is to go beyond what is visible, right? Like a filmmaker, or for those of you who are teaching film in your classes, or journalism, video journalism, you may always tell your students that you look outside the frame, right? Not just within the frame, but what is outside the frame, what was chosen to not be captured when something was being captured. So, similarly, what is not being said, what is not being shown, and who profits from the current mainstream narrative of communication, right? So, if news or information is coming to me in a particular way, who is making profit out of that, and whose narrative it is that I am consuming. The third we see is critical communication pedagogy, which was written in 2007, which speaks about classroom communication that engages in concepts of diversity, culture, power, and socio-economic status. Right, and then we come to Brooks, who speaks about assessing students' engagement with pedagogies of diversity, where they speak about giving an active voice to the student, right? And what is this voice? Is this voice just answering in class, or is this voice putting forth an opinion that may be the exact opposite of what I think of as an instructor, but am I still able to accept it, right? So these are some takeaway points. Maybe you can go back and think about this, right? Um, just give me a second. Right. So when we deal with critical pedagogy, right, we are dealing with breaking of hierarchy. You are promoting an inquisitive mindset. You are questioning, means you are teaching your students to question the storyteller. You are teaching them to question the dominant perspective, and you are allowing the student to be a co-creator, and by providing enough space for the student's voice, right? What this means then, right, is that you are training your students to question news monopoly. You are teaching them which of the conglomerates own which media houses, and therefore how does this news come to us. You are analyzing representation in pop culture, right? So you are looking at advertisements, you are looking at movies, you are looking at songs, and you are teaching them to analyze how representation is a very important part of studying media, right? So, for example, you may have seen there's this movie that released recently called Tangalan, right? So, you could perhaps ask your students to do a comparative analysis between Tangalan and KGF to see how both the movies, although on similar topic lines about gold mining and gold fields, handle the topic very differently, and how that affects the impact that it creates on them as an audience, right? You are training your students. If you are working with critical pedagogy, you are training your students to call out and identify fake news, right? So there are a lot of websites today that can help you to identify fake news. So the very first thing is, of course, you don't follow every. I mean, this is what you train your students, right? That every time we get a WhatsApp forward, we don't immediately forward it. You do the basic Google search to see, okay, has some credible news organization covered this? Is this reflected in multiple places? If not, there is a chance it's fake. There is a chance it's a rumor, right? About 2 years ago, I think. uh, real or false, or it'll give you the spectrum at least. Then there is alt news, then there is boom, right? And then there are other places like this. I mean, there are other websites like this, right? So moving on. So this is a quote from John Campbell, who is at the University of Temple. I mean, was at the University of Temple, and in July 2011, he said this. He said, I believe that as students develop their critical thinking, they will take greater responsibility for their own education and greater initiative in expanding their knowledge base. For the communication curriculum, a critical perspective questions institutional realities, provides students with tools to challenge their own assumptions in addition to the normative assumptions of the wider culture, and considers human emancipation to be an ultimate goal of education. The critical perspective recognizes value in the student's voice beyond the traditionally accepted discourses of media production. Right? So what are we dealing about? What are we dealing with in this quote? Right? We're dealing with a critical perspective questions institutional realities. What are institutional realities? When we question introduce institutional realities, we are questioning schools, we are questioning religion, we are questioning marriage, we are questioning family, right? And these students get provided with a tool to challenge their own assumptions in addition to the normative assumptions of the wider culture. So, as a student of media, then not only am I going and telling somebody that, hey, if you've held on to this belief for so long, maybe there is another way to look at it, right? Not only am I doing it for another person, I am also changing my own belief along the way, right? So, when I read this quote, I was immediately reminded of a certain Tamil movie that I really, really always enjoy watching. And I watched it multiple times. Right? It's called Anbe Sivan, Kamal Hassan Madhavan, long ago. Right? I'm sure some of you have seen it. And I'm always very fascinated with the character that Madhavan plays, because I feel like there is a very clear arc of character growth between the beginning of the movie and between the end of the movie, right? And I feel like he learns to challenge what he believes about the society. He learns to understand what is communism. He learns to understand the ideas of Marx, and he comes together with this really different person in a much forced situation, of course. But his assumptions change because he is forced to critically look at certain realities around him, including the realities of poverty, love, and family. Right? So I feel that bringing these examples can help us to train our students to develop a more critical outlook towards society. Right? So in the chat box, we have a fact check channel that is by the state, and there's a link to it. So maybe you guys can look at it and maybe fact check, they circulate it as a resource so that more people can fact check their news. Right. So going beyond the usual activities or methods, so just brainstorming a few ideas for a classroom that is engaging in critical pedagogical methods. So here, first of all, we are looking at media students as critical thinkers. Right? So some of the kind of activities that could happen in your classroom include number one, analyzing the same news piece across 5 different newspapers or news channels, or 4 or 3. But the idea is to train your students to understand that although the news may be the same, it may not be covered in the same way across different newspapers, right? So currently, I think one of the most trending news topics is the Tirupati Laddu controversy, right? And it would be very interesting to go and see how different platforms are covering the Tirupati Laddu controversy, right? So, for example, are mainstream newspapers covering it, or is it just happening through these digital sort of web portals, right? Then, is there a difference between the way the same Tirupati Laddu controversy is covered on Twitter versus how it is covered in a proper newspaper versus how it is covered in a news channel. Right? So, same topic, different places, different news coverage. And what happens when you analyze that is that you learn that news dissemination is a very purposeful act, and news dissemination is unfortunately today and may have always been a political and an economic activity as well, right? So newspapers and news organizations choose what they want to give out. The second thing is looking at news from the perspective of a mainstream news channel versus a YouTuber. So my examples here come from Hindi YouTubers, right? But I'm sure you may have Tamil references for this in your mind. So, for example, if I'm looking at Dhruv Rathi or if I'm looking at Ravish Kumar, how they cover news versus how Aaj Tak or NDTV or Sun News may cover news can have two completely different sides to it. While there may be overlaps, their perspectives may be different because of their, again, because of their economic or political agendas, right? Another another activity that may help in a critical pedagogy classroom is the analysis of YouTube comments below a particular trending news piece or even a video. So let's take a song video for example, right? It's like, let's say Samantha has come up with a new song and it's gone viral and it's trending and it's some kind of, what in Bollywood they call item number, but some kind of a dance song where she's, skimpily dressed and stuff like that. Have you ever uh, conducted an activity where everyone just sits together and scrolls on the comments below it once it has crossed a couple of million views? Scrolling these comments and maybe even categorizing them or trying to understand where these comments come from is also a reflection on the society we live in today, on the belief systems of the society, right? The next thing is that is shooting a documentary using a real issue. So this is something that we will come to in a later slide. The next thing is changing the ending of a sexist ad. So a really cool professor I know, he used to do this for his editing classes, where he would ask his students to change the ending of ads. So it would not only help them to learn editing, it would also help them to exercise their critical thinking skills, right? And of course, a more popular activity is to recognize sexism in popular song lyrics, which I think is overdone but never done enough, right? Because there are always new songs that are bashing up either men or women or transgenders or somebody or the other. So there's always material to do the last one. So I have been speaking continuously for 15 minutes now, and I'm sure you want to process this information, and you want to say something. So what we're going to do is we'll take a 2 minutes breather, in which time if there is some activity that you can think of, if there is a creative spark, if there's something in your mind which you say, oh, if we do this, it'll help our students to develop more critical thinking skills. Why don't you write that down in the chat box? Right? So you will write one activity in the chat that you think will help your students to engage in a more critical understanding of the world around them. You can just write it in one line. There is no pressure for you to build a whole assignment. You have 2 minutes to do so. Okay. I understand that 2 minutes is short, but I would say try. Try. If you cannot do it, no problem. But I would say try. It's 2:34. We will restart the session as 2:36. Please type in the chat box. I am waiting here for 2 minutes for your responses. If there's anybody who cannot type because it's probably difficult for you to go to the type box when you're watching it from your phone. If you feel like it's easier for you to speak at any point during the discussion session, if you want to speak, please unmute and please share what you feel. We would also be happy to hear your thoughts. just going to, while you are thinking and while you are doing this, I am going to take these 2 minutes to just respond to Madhurasi and Vignesh in the chat box. So, hi Vignesh, good afternoon. Do participate actively in the sessions by commenting in the chat boxes. And for Madhurasi, do I think all the news are fact oriented? I mean, you know, they should be, but a lot of, but I mean, not necessarily, because we also have editorial opinions, and we also have a lot of critical news articles. But whether fact or opinionated, at least it should revolve around an activity that actually took place. I mean, it's not speculative news making. So yeah, that would be good. So does anybody have any ideas, any creative spark? Don't worry if you think like, oh, I can't think right now, it's too late. I mean, it's this is a post lunch session, so probably most of you are working since 8 in the morning, and which means you've woken up at 4:30. So it's completely understandable, but maybe contribute to it by writing in the WhatsApp group later, or at least think about it for your own self. That would also be great. And Samantha says that the assignment that she would give is to analyze the character of a film directed by an actor and a film directed by a filmmaker, which can reveal the differentiation in characterization. And I think this is really a creative assignment. So well done, Samantha, and it's a great idea. And I think we can all apply this in our classrooms and give credit to Samantha. And we have Dr. Blessy, who says randomly take up few daily newspapers and identify the coverage the newspapers have given for environmental issues. Yes, definitely, Dr. Blessy, we can definitely do that. And we can even, in addition to that, we can look at movies or songs, that ads that talk about environmental consciousness. So that would also help to create like a more comparative understanding. But thank you so much, Dr. Blessy. Right, we have again Madrasi, who says each student can choose a media piece related to a current social issue. Yes, we will be coming to that shortly. And we have the HOD, who says that projects like shooting documentary itself is a process of critically understanding the world. That is true. That is true, right? Because there is so much that goes into shooting a documentary that you do end up analyzing the world around you. Okay, we will move on. For those of you who did not say, please do think about it. Take this home, chew on it. Right? We have Rajeshwari, who says ask students to track their media consumption activity. Okay, this is great. This is great, because when they track their media consumption activity, they will realize not just how much time they are spending on media, but what they are spending on it as well, right? So thank you so much, Rajeshwari. And we have Prabhu, who says that visiting a neighborhood community, documenting their problems and analysis of it. Yes, definitely, right? So, in fact, thank you, Prabhu, because I am going to be bringing this up in the next section as well, because this will not only help them develop a critical understanding of the world, but will also help them to work more collaboratively and take more charge of their lessons, right? So again, some questions to reflect upon, right? Maybe these you don't need to write it here because I know you've just been writing. But if you feel like, I am more than happy to read it. Okay, let's see. So we discussed all of this about critical pedagogy, right? And one of the most important things about critical pedagogy is to develop an analytical understanding of the world, ask questions, break hierarchies. So, do you think that India or Tamil Nadu especially is prepared for this? Right? Are we prepared, or are we matured enough as an academic community to allow hierarchies to break between student and teacher? Will we be accepting of that in our classrooms? Right? It's great to say all of this in theory, but if I think some film is absolutely rubbish, and my student comes and does a 5,000 word essay on why that film is great, am I in a space to accept it and still give it the highest marks just for its writing capacity and the capacity to justify what they believe? Right? So these are reflection questions. I don't know. Are we mature enough? Can we break our hierarchies with students? And honestly, does the social, economic, political situation that we are in today allow us to train our students to be critical? Right? We know that there are a lot of instances happening. You are not new to news, so I'm sure even around you, you must have heard of people falling into trouble because they have chosen to question certain uh, things, people, events, right? So, in a place like this, how do we actually develop a critical understanding, right? That is what we need to think about. Okay, moving on. Uh, so now we are going to talk about a constructivist pedagogy for media studies, right? We looked at critical, we are now going to look at constructivist. So you know that in constructivist pedagogy, again from yesterday, the learner is active, knowledge is socially constructed. The aim of learning is to make sense of the world that is around you, right? Great. Uh, some of the questions that we can be asking in a classroom that is using constructivist media pedagogy, right? What are some of these questions? Number one, in what ways do media shape our constructions of reality? Right? So, how does what we watch, what we listen to, what we read, what we scroll through shape how I view the world? Right? Number two, how has development in communication technology influenced our awareness of the world? Right? So, okay, today we are much more connected than people were, 40 years ago. But uh, is that really always helpful? I don't know. It's a questionable thing, right? And question number three, are all meanings essentially subjective? Right? So the thing with so Bhaskar, I see your question and we will get to it, right? I just want to finish this slide. So the thing with the humanities is that a lot of our experiences are very subjective, right? So if all meaning is subjective, then how do we sort of understand the world around us, right? So these are few questions to keep in mind, to keep at the back of your mind when we think of a constructivist pedagogy for media classrooms. Some things that you can go back and read or refer to, right, would be Latuka, Latusa, I don't know how it is said. The constructivist pedagogy that we are looking for, 2006, that speaks about designing learning experiences in a way that encourage and enable learning, right? So it speaks about the creation of an environment where learning is possible and the creation of activities by doing which learning actually takes place. And then we have Jenkins and others who speak about confronting the challenges of participatory culture, media education for the 21st century, 2009, who speak about how participatory culture creates an environment of collaboration and of civic connection, right? So collaboration then becomes really important. Uh, right. So when we look at constructivist pedagogy, what we are looking at is we are looking at re-evaluating prior knowledge. We are looking at participatory learning culture. We are looking at working collaboratively in teams. We are questioning self-perception, and we know that the learner has an active role. Now, what this means in the classroom, right, is that we discuss case studies. So, for example, using media law or media ethics, case studies can be discussed. We can engage in peer learning, which can happen by the discussion of media theory and which can happen by the discussion of media theory and concepts. We look at promotion of group work and of presentations, right? So you can have collaborative photography projects, Like Prabhu had said earlier, visiting a neighboring community and documenting real life problems would be a great thing to feature here. Right? You learn how to disagree respectfully in a group discussion environment. You know that today entrances to a lot of corporate jobs, to a lot of private institutes for higher studies involve group discussions. And unfortunately, we are so used to seeing these debates on TV that have forgotten how to disagree respectfully, right? And I would even say, as just a fun thing, maybe you can go back and watch a debate from the early 90s to see how there was such a big difference in the civil way in which these debates were conducted. So, can we then train our students to disagree respectfully, right? And students engage with multiple different media instruments and they learn to reinvent, to remix, and to recreate, leading to different media production outcomes. What this means is that I am not just looking at one type of media instrument, I am using various ones, I am bringing a mix of them, and I am learning how to shuffle this to my own benefit so that I control the media production outcome, right? Because as a student of media, not just am I a student, I am also a budding media professional. I am also a critical thinker. I am also a citizen of the country, right? So how do I then balance all of these identities? Uh, so I'm going to taking the hierarchy, and of course, it is your class. You will decide whether this hierarchy is broken or not. But I that people who are studying in your top universities of Oxford or Cambridge are disrespectful. No, they address by the name. So they will use the second name or the first name and say Prof. Rajeshwari or Dr. Prabhu or something like that. So there is still respect, but the hierarchy is broken. But hierarchy does not merely lie in this naming sort of thing, right? Because there is a cultural context, and okay, we are in Tamil Nadu, and people are very sentimental about, how they are speaking to others, or sometimes you may be okay, but the other person may take offense. So it's not just about naming; it is also about allowing for diverse perspectives to exist in the classroom. I know for a fact that I had a wonderful professor, uh, and when she would ask a question, 10 of us would give different answers. She would ask for some interpretation. Maybe we would discuss like an ad, and 10 of us would give different answers. And never once did she tell somebody you are wrong. She said, "Okay, that's really interesting, but what if we also look at it like this, right?" So what she is doing, she is not diminishing the student. She is not removing the perspective of the student. I can have the most absurd perspective, but has in I have observed her closely for 3 years, and never once did she say that this is wrong. Moving on now to the next slide. Uh, so this is a quote that I will leave for you to read later because the PowerPoint will come for you. So I would say you read it by yourself and you reflect on it. But I just want to say, I just want to read the first line that says the best teachers are good listeners, right? And if I can listen to my student, or if as a student I am heard, then what I feel for the teacher will probably be very different. Okay, so very quickly, what are some of the activities and methods that we can use in a constructivist pedagogical classroom, right? We can have case studies, okay? Um, Case studies involving issues that are happening around us real life, right? So, for example, if we take the Wayanad disaster or Manipur riots or Kolkata medical students protest, what are we doing? We're engaging with real life examples. So, media students learn how to become citizens. And some of the questions you can ask is the reporting on this ethical? Can you go on a fund collection campaign? Can you organize a protest? can you perform a street play about this issue? Then not only are you engaging with media, you are also bringing change to society, right? And while doing all of this, you can make a documentary about your efforts. You turn your journalism project into covering real life stories of the Wayanad disaster victims. You can volunteer at a relief site and create reels about it and create your hashtags. So your Instagram followers will grow, but you will also be learning how to create media and you are changing society. And you can go to a protest site and collect audio bites from protesters and maybe just do an audio mix of it, right? So this is something that that you can definitely consider or take back. Like I said, these are just suggestions. Please feel free to add your own. Okay, so if you can think of one activity that you think will help your students work more collaboratively, you can write it in the chat box and you have 1 minute to do so because we are a little short of time. Instead of 2 minutes, you have 1 minute to do so. If anybody feels like writing something, please do. Otherwise, again, take it home, reflect on it, and think about how the classroom can become a much more collaborative space. Okay, I guess that you are going to take it home and think about it more reflectively, right? Okay, so feel free to share it in the WhatsApp group later. Moving on, right? So the last thing that we're going to look at very quickly is multicultural pedagogy, where you respect across all categories of caste, class, sexuality, gender, disability, and all the binaries that you can probably think of, right? Race included, of course, right? And you are creating an environment in your classroom that is culturally sensitive. So these are some of the readings that you can look at, right? Again, I'm going to just sort of skip through this slide really fast, but just to highlight that there's this person, means this theorist, scholar called Lowe, who looked at hip hop as a pedagogy, and I think how lovely that is. Because if you go back and trace the roots of how the hip hop culture has emerged, you use hip hop as a pedagogy to really understand and teach respect and social differences and how to overcome them. I think is a great idea. And also with McLaren, we can see that there's a very important question that is posed to us, right? That can educators develop a concept of unity and difference, where students begin to understand difference as a tool of political mobilization? And what a lovely thing that is, right? If our classrooms can become spaces that function on the same conscience, same consciousness, right? Where if we are able to create an environment where the teacher and the student, no matter the background, no matter the religion, no matter the caste, no matter the language, if we can all function at the same consciousness or at least try to and understand that when we are forced to dislike somebody or when we are forced to think of the other as an opposite, it is a tool of political mobilization. How lovely would those classrooms be? Right, so that is what we learn from McLaren. And of course, Sharma says, look at popular media as a site for reevaluating your own knowledge. Okay, moving on. Some of the questions that a multicultural pedagogy in the media classroom would ask is how can media be created in ways that value cultural difference? And how do different communication practices contribute to cultural unity and cultural division? The connection between individual identity and communication practices, and popular culture was, and their messages of unity or difference. Right, so going beyond the usual activities in the classroom, if you're using a multicultural pedagogy in your classroom, some of the activities could be interviewing with minority communities in a region. So, for example, can I go interview non-Tamil speakers in Chennai and ask them about their experiences? I think we would have a lot to learn about how we treat other communities if we do this activity. Then there is the project of stereotypical representations of communities in popular media. So, for example, the case of Chennai Express, right? And there were so many people who were completely aghast at the way Tamilians were represented in this extremely Bollywood movie that had nothing to do with Tamil Nadu. For example, can we have a class potluck to appreciate food from other cultures? Right? It will help us to grow. And can there be media analysis of reporting on violence against Dalits? No, we can try. Okay, so this you take home with you. How can your students be more culturally sensitive? And you reflect on it, and maybe just brainstorm and use it in your classrooms. I'm sorry because we're out of time. Right, so just some additional thoughts as wrap up thoughts. We're closing in a minute. So, when I was reading and preparing for this, I came across something that really touched me, which said that why before how, right? So, why before how is if you know the why of something, it'll help you to understand how to teach it. If you need to understand why you are teaching it. Right? Then there is this other person called Joe Rule who has his own YouTube lectures on, who has a TED Talk lecture on YouTube, who said a very lovely thing about what the two loves of a teacher should be. And he said one is research based love for the subject, and the other is a relationship with the student. And the third is that there are many creative ways of quizzing today, which is Quizlet, WhatsApp polls, and Kahoot. Right? So I would suggest maybe if you're not familiar with these methods, you familiarize yourself and maybe you administer little activities using either Quizlet or WhatsApp polls or Kahoot and see your class, be more fun because there will be a little gamified. Okay, so thank you so much for being attentive and participating. For those of you who have come out and answered in the chat box, I really thank you. And for those of you who feel a little shy or just too tired from the day, I urge you to take these questions back with you and reflect upon them. You have been very patient and listened to me for 60 minutes. I thank you for that. You can always ask your questions in the chat box.
Mute. Mute. Thank you so much, Ms. Rashmi Mehta, for this insightful presentation. A lot of new things for me personally, and I'm sure, many of you are, wondering what are the things that we can do, and we can, how we can break the hierarchy in our lecture rooms. And today we experience a lot of interaction via chat. Can we take last 10 minutes for our Q&A and feedback? How can we do that? Would you like to post it on the chat, or would you like to unmute and share your thoughts? Maybe for let's have this Q&A since we are now it's 3 p.m. So can we take next 2 minutes for a quick chat? You can even unmute and share your thoughts. So maybe I can start with this. I have a question, both for speaker and for the people who are attending, to the participants. As most of us are having good number of years in our hand as teaching experience. How do we actually break the hierarchy? Because it is something that from this presentation I have been wondering, because it is always, we are power conscious, there is a power that is given to a lecturer or a teacher in a school or in a lecture room, a professor got more power than the student. And to break that today is something, it's not usual. Okay, there are schools, alternative schools got, approaches like what uh, the speaker has told, shared. I wonder whether we can, kind of practice that in our day-to-day lecture room. Um, Sometimes I get butterflies in my tummy, like when students ask tough questions that I don't have answers. So, how can we, like, we are used to a template for a very long time. So, how can we break that hierarchy uh, where students are silent, or, communications most of the time one way, or the professor lecturer having, or being the lord, or giving master of the knowledge, in the knowledge sharing session. So how can we break that, uh, over to the participants and to the speaker, uh, especially when we are living in a, template based, or when we are already into a framework where it is kind of given that only professors speak most of the time and they got all the knowledge in the world. So participants, please do feel free to unmute and share your thoughts, and it's also open to the speaker. We are also having few questions. So Professor Madras is asking, how do you foster collaboration among students? What group activities have proven to be successful in promoting teamwork? What strategies do you use to create a positive and inclusive classroom environment? How do you handle disruptive behavior?
Okay, so thank you for that intervention. And to answer, first of all, Bhaskar, who asked earlier about hip hop, I would suggest that Bhaskar, you go read about what hip hop is and the history of it, because I think closely understanding the history of hip hop will help you to understand how it can be used as a critical text, right? And that is what Dr. Lowe does in his works. He uses hip hop and spoken word poetry to actually explain equality and harmony to students, right? Because hip hop as a culture emerged as a site of protest, it emerged as a culture of resistance. And so I would, and generally, if you are interested in the history of hip hop, I would urge you to read more. Just a simple Google search on how hip hop emerged and what was this political, racial situation of America at that time when it emerged will give you a lot about, you know, this question. Second, coming to Professor Madrasi, uh, I think a lot of what you have asked depends on your personality as a professor, right? So, uh, out of all the 30 people that we have here, each of us may function differently because each of us come with our own unique personalities. Pedagogical methods cannot exist in isolation to our own personalities, right? So if I know that I am more of a people's person and I can bring about the energy in the classroom, I will use that versus somebody who knows that they will function a little differently, right? One of the ways of fostering collaboration among students is to do icebreakers, right? Students will be happy to collaborate with each other if they get to bond as a team. Of course, forced bonding happens when we put them in random presentation groups. But if you can create a lot of icebreakers activities for your students, it will help your students to realize that, oh, classes can be fun. Our classmates are actually nice people. The person who looks scary is a wonderful person. It's just an introvert, right? So again, for icebreaker ideas, lots of icebreakers available, free resources online. Simple, just search for it, and you will get a lot of ideas. Uh, uh, what strategies do you use to create a positive and inclusive classroom environment? I mean, of course, I know that there are people here with years of experience, and if any of them want to take this question on how they have promoted inclusive environments, you're most welcome to. But what I have learned from being a student is that I know that the classes I felt most included in were the classes that never insulted, never humiliated, and never used power as a means of achieving an end. Right? In fact, they say that the teachers who are actually good will never uh, demand respect out of you. You will automatically give it to them eventually. Maybe not in the beginning, because in the beginning you're not in love with them yet. But eventually that respect will come. Right? So how do you handle disruptive behavior? I don't know what are the rules of your college, what are the rules of your workplace. But also what are your beliefs as a person, right? Because it's one thing to yell and stop it, but the other thing is if it is repeated, can you have a private chat with that student? Can you go visit that student's house? Can you try to understand why this person is disruptive? Can that student be given free counseling sessions, confidentiality completely promised? So yeah, so that. Then we come to Samantha. Samantha says, according to me, staying judgmental makes us feel like we stay on top of the hierarchy. Completely right. When we break the stereotypes and just listen to the listener without feeling the student and the teacher label, then it can be an inclusive classroom. Yes, so this is great. So I think Professor Samantha has answered your question, and this is great. So we are always a facilitator rather than a teacher. So I think this is a great way to look at it. I think if we stop looking at position, but look at ourselves not, at the top, but as a facilitator, helping people to do something or aiding, scaffolding them, it would be great. How can you effectively incorporate technology to enhance learning? Professor Mantla is asking. I think by first of all familiarizing yourself with technology and not having the little issue that we had at the beginning of the session. So I'm really sorry about that. And also by all these tools, Quizlet, Kahoot, WhatsApp polls, Telegram polls, Google Classroom, Google Drive, Padlet, um, Zoom, whiteboards, so many tools available at your exposure today, right? So yeah, thank you all for your questions, and I hope you had a good time and there is something that you take away from this.
Thank you so much for your questions, and Professor Prakash has put up the feedback form for today's session. As you all know that we need to fill up, it is mandatory for our participation and for the certificate at the end of the 5-day session. So kindly uh, fill the form, and we are taking it very seriously. So yesterday's feedback has been thoroughly read, and we have taken certain points that where we need to improve. So thank you so much for writing that those points. Kindly ensure that before 6 or 7 in the evening, finish that form. And we are coming to the end. Over to Professor Manjula for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Jobin, for clapping. Thank you, Dr. Jobin. That was really nice.
On behalf of all the participants, I extend my heartfelt thanks to our distinguished resource person, Mrs. Mehta, and organizers for this FDP session and continuous upgradation of knowledge and experiments on teaching methods. We are grateful for the insightful presentation and interactive discussions that are emphasized the need for long learning and innovation in education. A special thanks to the technical team, Mr. Prakash, Bhaskar, and Rosary Jerome, and all our department staff members for ensuring the smooth and for conducting this event. We also thank the participants for active involvement, which made the session truly engaging. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samantha.
Thank you all. See you all at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you.